Materials can be the greatest cost on a project, and the effective flow of materials is vital for project success. Yet projects commonly run into supply chain problems. This research presents recommendations to improve supply chain performance in the areas of process improvements, supplier integration, and digital supply chain. Improving supply chain performance can maximize the benefits of advanced work packaging programs, improving productivity by as much as 25% and reducing total installed cost by as much as 10%. Here to present their findings, please welcome William O'Brien, Mike Reed, John Walker, and Annabella Martin.
Hello and welcome to Modernizing the Supply Chain and Increasing the Value of Advanced Work Packaging. Research Team 363 is excited to bring you the overview of our research results and recommendations for practice. This project report is part of a theme of multiple report outs around enhancing AWP and moving it to better effectiveness for execution today and moving towards the next generation. So let's start with a little scenario here. So we see a text back and forth between an area manager and the material coordinator is typing and responding back saying, April 2023, when this vessel is going to arrive.
Hello?
Hey, John, it's Mike. Hey, I just got your text back on 4V2943. What in the world's going on? We awarded this PO in August of last year. I have to set it in September of 21. You have to get it here by then. You got to fix this.
Well, hello to you too. There is no way that is possible.
And why not?
Well, this vessel takes 18 months to fabricate. Best case scenario, you can have your vessel in February of 2022. And it also takes 8 weeks to get the site. So that's putting it at about April of 2022.
So what you're really saying, they haven't even started on it yet. So what have they been doing since January of this year?
Well, the vendor has been working on 1V1001, 2V2002, and then 3V3003.
Are you kidding me? I don't need any of those until like December of 2023. How in the world did this happen?
Well, that's a great question. How in the world did that happen? And unfortunately, those kind of conversations happen all too often on our projects today. And we'd like to figure out ways to avoid them and make better projects. So I'm Bill O'Brien from the University of Texas at Austin. I'm going to talk for a little bit about opportunities and findings for the research. So big picture, project cost is 40 to 50% of materials, but materials really control about 80% of the project schedule, just like that little scenario we just saw. So we think there's an opportunity for maturation of supply chain processes to better support effective project execution, and all of that is within advanced work packaging as an organizing framework. So a little bit here about what's the scale of the opportunity. If we talk about advanced work packaging, we know that AWP can improve project total installed cost by about 10%. And we know that workface planning, which is just the construction piece, can maybe get about 4% of that 10%. So that leaves another 6% on the table. And that 6% is from full advanced work packaging, starting up in feed and going through engineering and through all the way through execution. Now, that's a lot involved in that, but the supply chain is a very big piece of that. So effective supply chain management can help reach that 10%. But in practical terms, what's it feel like for projects every day? We want to avoid those scenarios and those discussions we just saw and stop having an acrimonious project and working at ones where everyone's working together on the same page and is having a better project outcome. So what are our solution parameters? We have recommendations around this AWP and supply chain processes. We want to better integrate with our suppliers so they can be better partners to us. Supporting all of that is a digital supply chain so we can transfer information seamlessly. Put those three together, and that's helping to maximize the potential of advanced work packaging. Some specific opportunities are around the AWP framework, AWP definitions for procurement work packages and supply chain process. There are multiple process and system improvements. We found many opportunities to better utilize suppliers as partners, and there's some low-hanging fruit around orders. So how did we work through all of this? Well, like any good research team, we start with literature review. We interviewed a bunch of suppliers to get their perspective. We looked at owner and EPC processes, and we sort of finished it up with a survey to make sure our findings were broad and valid across a wide range of the industry. Speaking about literature review, we want to call out specifically CII AWP materials management and supply chain literature that's come behind us, and we're standing on their shoulders to move it forward. All of this comes together into our findings and recommendations. So a little bit more about findings. We used that survey to broaden our understanding of what we've learned from our internal deliberations and from our supplier interviews. And so we had identified a lot of common challenges with customer orders, ranging from unclear scope definition, unclear information requests in the PO, various things about friction, information delivery, expediting, lack of clear lines of communication and authority. So we asked both suppliers and then owners, contractors, and engineers, so what's the impact? What you can see here, an impact going from no impact to serious impact for the group of suppliers in blue, and then owner, engineers, and contractors lumped together in the red. About 30 suppliers and just over 80 of the owner, engineer, contractors were responding here. And then the darker the color indicates where most of the responses are for each category. What you see here, and the big takeaway, is that there is clear agreement that there is impact across all of these challenges. And we see this as really low-hanging fruit because a lot of these can be addressed in just better attention to our RFP and PO situation. We also talked about frequency of common issues stemming from suppliers not being involved at the right time. Are they suppliers there to add the value they can? So things when suppliers aren't involved at the right time range from added cost, increased chance of late deliveries, limited flexibility to respond to changes, increased RFIs and change orders, and so on. And same thing here, this is a frequency chart from very rare to very common, and we see for both suppliers, owner, engineers, and contractors, a lot of agreement that these challenges or these issues happen fairly frequently, sometimes very common. And while a little bit of disagreement between suppliers and the rest, the overall message here is all of these issues are seen frequently by both suppliers and their clients. So with that said, let me hand this over to Mike Reed from Dow to take away some recommendations from our research on supplier integrations and process improvements. So Mike?
Okay, thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Now let's start digging into what we actually heard in the supplier interviews as we went through and asked a standard set of questions. What we really saw was a lot of feedback on missed opportunities, and as we started collecting this information, what we really saw and saw the correlation was past AWP recommendations, in particular from RT 272, was to pull engineering and construction into the project as early as possible. So our hypothesis of what would happen if we engaged our suppliers earlier in the project timeline. So as we were doing these interviews, we were asking some of those same questions of our suppliers. And what we really heard from them is we can help bring a lot of value to your project through collaboration, working with you on options and other things for the materials that you need for your projects. But the kicker was you've got to engage us early enough or more completely to bring us into the project in a timely fashion so that we have an opportunity to work with you and collaborate with your project team. And so I'm going to go through a couple of examples that really stuck with the research team's minds as we were looking at the responses and some of the data back from the surveys. So the first one had to do with new technology. And so one of the pipe fabricators that we talked about said, yes, we had a customer come to us with a large amount of pipe and a very short timeline. And what we really saw when we came back and said, you know, we could have helped you save about 10% on your fabrication costs if you would have let us cold bend the 2-inch or smaller pipe as opposed to the welded old fabrication technologies. But because they didn't bring us into the project early enough, that was a missed opportunity for that customer to save about 10% on the fabrication of those particular pipe spools. A simple example, but you know, when you have a big project with thousands of pipe spools, that can add up to a lot of money. And then the second example that we had really deals with out of sequence, and again, a pipe fabricator relayed to us that they had received an order in 7 packages with an order from 1 to 7 stated at the beginning of the project. And what happened as the course of the project progressed, what they really saw was the engineering data came in multiple orders. So the customer did not provide the specifications and the engineering data needed to do the packages in order. And so what happened was everything got delivered at the end, and the order of sequence that was originally set was not followed because the engineering data was not provided by the customer. And so those two quick examples, one is the use of new technology and understanding what the customer and supplier can collaborate to do together. And the second one of the data and information sharing is the things that we took forward and we looked, okay, how would we need to change or augment the AWP process flow diagrams and put these information in the spots and show our member companies this is where you need to make some adjustments in your process. So when we looked at these flow charts, we came up with about 20 different updates to the flow charts to recommend, and I'll briefly go through these. The first one really has to do with developing a qualified supplier list by material type and understanding what their capabilities are. So again, going back to what is the new technology that the supplier has available that you as a customer can take advantage of. The next set is really starting to look at, okay, what materials do I need to buy, and organizing that on the project so that we can get that information and start using it sooner for the downstream aspects of the project. So as we progress in this particular case, a material responsibility matrix is really a list of this is what we're going to buy from the project and how am I going to use that data together going forward. And really the first part is you need to start looking at how would I tie specific AWP data for the project to the materials list at this point where it's known. So construction work areas, construction work package, engineering work package, PWP, those type of information, whatever is available at this point in the project, start tying that information to a particular material purchase. And then as you progress through the project, you're going to update that information, build on it, add to it, and eventually get to an inquiry document for suppliers. And this is where we really want to take advantage of putting this is what we want for advanced work packaging data into those inquiry packages. So we've listed a few things here that we suggest. This is by no means meant to be an inclusive list, just examples of some of the things a particular project or company may want to do. But it really has to do with data structure, what data, timing, and what other expectations that you need to do advanced work packaging for this project. And then as we progress more towards gearing up for construction, you're talking about adding a material readiness forecast into the project mix, continuing to update the status of material, and then providing that information to the AWP workplace planning team and issuing those materials out to construction from an inventory control perspective. So all these new boxes just really details around most of what companies are already doing, but it wasn't in the flow chart yet. So after we get that, really what we do is, why does supply chain data matter so much to construction sequencing? So we have this procurement work package. It is an optional construct coming out of our team, but it does match the boundaries of the CWPs. And really what we're trying to do is give this visual representation from a materials readiness standpoint to the AWP workplace planning team, so the field can plan and sequence their construction in an effective manner. Part of that information comes out of what we're calling a supply chain process, which is going to vary from company to company, but the basics of it is track materials and what information needs to be delivered to the project team, support the execution sequence, so make sure that we have the right priorities so that we get the equipment and materials that we need first to support the sequence of construction, and also help support constraint management. So at this point, I'm going to turn over to John Walker from Atlas RFID to take us through the next part of the presentation.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that overview. And now I want to jump into some of the elements of the digital supply chain and some of the research findings as it relates to the digital supply chain. So we looked at a few things of opportunities to improve information and data. And some of the specific things that we looked at were some of the data requirements for AWP, some of the process gathering around that, supply chain status reporting to ensure compliance is being withheld throughout the supply chain, and then taking a look at how we really measure our suppliers and some of the traditional versus newer techniques of supplier qualification criteria. In addition, we took a look at some of the technology that is available, should be available, kind of future expansion of tools that are already existing in order to maintain and manage a healthy digital supply chain and have the information and data flow as necessary throughout the project to fuel AWP programs. And I want to dig into some of the materials management tool capabilities and some of the ideal functionality that should exist and the interfaces that should exist within a tool to help better maintain and manage a digital supply chain. So if we take a look first at just some of the data elements of a digital supply chain and some of the digital threads that you may have heard around, there are several teams that are out there right now that are looking at the individual data threads and digital threads, if you will, of AWP, and those groups are made up of really owners and EPCs, and our focus was really to ensure the process around ensuring that suppliers understand what these data elements are and these digital threads are. So really we would need to agree on kind of the process and the procedure for moving and understanding the digital threads, whereas the other teams are really focused on what those digital threads and data elements are. And one of the things that we came out is, we've asked for years for suppliers and vendors and fabricators to provide information and data, and vice versa, providing information and data back to them to better effectively plan the work. But really, the compliance element has somewhat been missing. So one of the recommendations is to start treating data as a widget. And what I mean by that is treat it as an OS&D. So if you receive a widget that's been purchased from a vendor on a job site that is not in compliance, whether it's damaged or it's not in the right spec, you essentially send it back and correct it and don't pay for it. until you have that remedied. So really kind of getting down and treating the data as a physical element will help curb and provide some guidance and also some ramifications for not participating in a digital strategy, digital supply chain strategy. But in order to do that, we really have to ensure that all parties understand the specific data requirements, and not necessarily just what needs to be sent, what data fields, but the format that they're sent in, when do they need to be delivered? And then obviously the data accuracy is vitally important. If I provide data, that's one thing, but providing accurate data is what we're looking for. So really from a supplier perspective, there's a level of training to understand and help suppliers understand the specific data requirements from a format, delivery, on-time delivery, and then also the accuracy of that data that is really important. And then all of that needs to be rolled up into an approved vendor list. And I think a lot of us as EPCs and owners have these AVLs or vendor lists in which we do business with certain suppliers. And traditionally, these are maintained and monitored on several different types of criteria, such as on-time delivery of a widget, kind of what I was saying at the beginning, and making sure that widget is delivered accurately. Then also pricing has been a traditional element for supplier qualification. But some of the newer criteria that we're recommending for vendor qualification revolves around the data aspects. Like I was saying in the, understanding the data requirements, the qualification needs to be taken into consideration for data delivery accuracy, data conformance to the requirements, the completeness of the data, and then making sure that the data is delivered in a timely manner, not when the shipment has already arrived on site. You send the data as well in advance so that you can plan properly for that shipment. And then, a key piece of the puzzle, which ties into my next slides here, is having the ability for some digital tool to manage the process throughout this digital supply chain. And so with that being said, there's a need to advance some of the systems and infrastructure that we have in place to help manage the supply chain. And so, we set some parameters up for what constitutes digital supply chain from a data perspective, but then we took a look and said, do our traditional tools even have the ability to handle this information properly during project execution? And I think some do, some do not. Some have parts and pieces that are very good, but ultimately, I think putting a standard together, as we have done with this research team, is what constitutes a really strong core materials management system. Will help others kind of understand what that looks like. But really, we broke it down into 9 functional elements, and I'm not going to read off each of these, but you can see it and you'll be able to dig into it further into the report. But there are some really key elements that I want to touch on before advancing. Number 1 is around the robust administrative side of things. And so if you think about a materials management system, in all the systems that are in project execution, communication and data sharing amongst those systems is extremely important. So being able to have a tool that can move data in and out seamlessly, whether it's from a more sophisticated API type integration that exists with other tools that are in your execution toolbox, or just being able to take a spreadsheet and import it or export information out for somebody else to consume it, you need to have a really solid way to manage information in the system. Secondly, around the administrative side of things, one of the things that we found was, having a cloud-based application that could be extended out to multiple parties in the project execution. This may be other contractors working with you, such as in joint ventures. This may be out to suppliers, being able to roll that out so that suppliers can gain access directly into the platform to author information. But with that, you need to have a solid roles and permissions to limit the amount of visibility to just that party's scope of work. So really some important features around the administrative side of things in the system. In addition, kind of taking some of the past CII best practices is having a solution that's mobile. With a cloud-based solution is great because you can access it really anywhere, but also having the ability to have a mobile app to have information at your fingertips about what's going on in your supply chain, and also being able to bring in some of the IoT sensors that are out there today, whether it be an RFID type application, barcode, or consuming information from 3PLs of satellite GPS tags on equipment. There's so many different types of IoT sensors that are out there today. The tool would really benefit by having the ability to consume that information information as well. So I'm not going to go through each of these bubbles here, but those are some of the key elements of some of the things that we thought would really bring the typical materials management system up to the next level. And with that being said, I do want to pause and bring up a panel here in addition to myself. I'd like to ask Mike Reed to come virtually back up, and then also hear from Annabella Martin from Hilti today, and talk a little bit about how we're taking these lessons that we've learned from this research and folding it into our own company's execution. And I'll go ahead and start off from Atlas RFID's perspective. We're a software company. This mainly focuses kind of field materials management, but we're a software company at heart. But we also understand that there's a huge element of processes and also personnel that make this thing successful. So we're really focusing on the digital supply chain coordinators and the trainings associated with what that role looks like, to ensure that the people that we're putting out on the job sites really fundamentally understand the role of digital supply chain coordinators and the philosophy of a digital supply chain. So at our company, that's what we're really focused on, and trying to take some of these lessons from this research and fold it out into the field. So I'll pass it over to Mike to talk a little bit about what Dow's been doing at his organization.
Thanks, John. So I think the thing that I would add to this panel part discussion is really the work that we're looking at with suppliers and how we are getting that information and collaboration that I was talking about earlier going. In particular, more on the information side at the moment, where we are very focused on making sure that the information and data asked to support advanced work packaging is going out with the bid inquiry packages to the suppliers. And we're also doing some pre-work with suppliers to give them, let's say, a heads up that some new requirements are coming your way around this space as well. What we really saw was, people took our packages even though we were asking for different data, and just did what they knew that we had always done in the past. So what we had to do was really refocus suppliers around, we're asking some new information. And so it's more of a project by project basis, and depending on the equipment and how we're going to track data, but we're trying to ask for data at a fair point in the bid process, so that the suppliers have the opportunity to address their requests. And also, if there's a significant financial impact that they may want to add to their bid, they have that opportunity to do that as well. And so I'll pass on to Annabella Martin with Hilti to kind of finish off the panel here.
Thank you, Mike and John. So just as John mentioned that Atlas RFID is primarily a software company, Hilti has historically been known as a hardware and a tools company. But what we've realized over the years is that alone is not enough to drive the level of integration for materials into projects. So we've had to look at how do we complement our offering in the hardware space, and use enablers such as software and other services to be able to deliver a better solution. And at the end of the day, what we realize is that what's needed in this is people expertise, hiring people that know our customers' workflow, ex-customers even, to better understand what are the owner and the EPC work processes, better understand what are the requirements of AWP, which is not commonly known in the supplier community. So at the end of the day, we can better align on the project requirements. From a people standpoint too, looking at hiring folks, the younger generation that are embracing new technologies and have that expertise to bring it to the table. We've spent a lot of time evaluating our own corporate processes and how do we restructure ourselves to better support our customers in the advanced work packaging space. But not only that, looking at our own supply chain practices to see how that can be leveraged in the capital project space. So looking at the integration of hardware, software, and services into our customers' workflow in the engineering and material management group space, really defining what John has mentioned is that digital widget, a digital twin equivalent to our hardware, and making sure that the right data attributes to that material have been properly coded into the system. Deploying material catalogs through our customers' material management and procurement programs, leveraging certain industry software such as Oracle and SAP Ariba, just to name a few, and then really focusing on a bit of the customization that needs to happen in this space. Now, it's, a collaborative dialogue is required, that we're properly defining the data that's needed to facilitate its transfer, and really at the end of the day promote a better project performance. The other thing that we're looking at is moving away from what I would say are knee-jerk transactional purchases during the construction phase, and really moving more towards upfront, more well-aligned and properly scoped out strategic contracts. And one of the biggest challenges that I see in this space is, the doors, to the EPC and owner world aren't necessarily always open, sometimes difficult to get through. And it ties into not being engaged at the right time. So we're always happy to help. We just need to be, invited into the circle of trust, so to speak, to have those partnering discussions on how can we bring some of these technologies and better align from a data standpoint to enable a better execution of the project. So now that we have gone through our presentation and our panel discussion, I'd like to bring us in for a close and a summary of what we've covered today. So we looked at the solution parameters behind this research and the findings specifically related to the modifications of the supply chain processes, specifically looking at the RT272 flowcharts. Discussed how it is that we need to better supply or integrate the suppliers, not just the data, but really have a collaborative dialogue with our suppliers, and very robust supplier pre-qualification programs to facilitate that integration. Looking at the importance of what it is a digital supply chain, and this is a transition in our industry where this is paramount. This is key to the success of some of our projects, and in certain instances requires the role of a digital supply coordinator. So it's a harmonization of all these solution parameters that is really going to allow us to maximize the potential of advanced work packaging. Now, Bill had mentioned early on impacts related to some of the common challenges and the frequency of the issues that we see when we don't integrate suppliers at the right time. But let's look at the positive side. What are the benefits that we see when we do integrate our suppliers at the right time? And so what we see here is from our industry survey, from 112 respondents, and we had a good representation, a balanced representation of owners, engineers, contractors, and suppliers. And the consensus is, if we look at some of these benefits specifically, by engaging the supplier at the right time, and in most cases earlier, we're going to have a higher assurance on-time delivery. Sharing with that supplier information related not just to the data requirements and the sequencing will allow that particular supplier to optimize their own supply chain and their own production practices to ensure a successful project. Improved ability to deliver on the information requirements. So there's agreement that collaboration is needed to define what's the information that's needed, but then how we're going to share this, right? And there's a lot of examples on how that can be done in reality. So, take away some of these benefits and know that there are substantial improvements that can be done, and we'd like to get to where we're fully maximizing that AWP potential and realizing the total installed cost savings that we see can be actually achieved. The 10% of total installed cost how do we get there? So let's really put that in action. So what's our call to action today? Engage your suppliers, leverage the data, work with your suppliers and the other stakeholders to really align on what those data requirements are. And then what's very important is that you have the people, the process and technologies in place and in balance so that we can realize the full potential of advanced work packaging. I'd like now to share with the group the members of our research team 363, which you can see here. We had the pleasure of starting off in many face-to-face meetings and had to transition to virtual meetings as we're bringing you this message to you today. Most of you to many of you that are in your home. So big thanks goes out to Dr. O'Brien and our research assistant Jay Choi, as well as some of these other industry individuals. Now, very importantly, please know that this is a snapshot in time. This information that we've shown with you here today has to live and be acted out in our day-to-day work. And there's an opportunity to continue these discussions, to continue to advance a lot of these practices. So I highly encourage you to look into other ways to get involved through our supply chain, CBA, our advanced work packaging, CBA, our community of business advancement, as well as our local connect group. You know, it's important to bring this to the next generation that is going to continue to make this a reality in the world that we live in. So with this, thank you on behalf of all of our RT363 team members today. Have a great day.